is Peter Lucas. This is the Niner Fanatic podcast. And, I decided to have another pod, another day. What did Lynch have to say today? He was live at the combine, and he had quite a few things to say about a bunch of different topics. Big up to the reporters that were asking him questions. They asked him, and I mean, some things we knew already, some things he gave us a little bit of clarification on. But here we are, Niner Fanatic podcast. Let's get it. And here's the intro. Hey, you guys, what's going on? Once again, it is Peter Lucas. This is the Niner Fanatic podcast. And before we get started, make sure you give this video a like. Make sure that you give me a subscribe if you haven't already. Make sure you hit the bell so you can get the notifications when I'm going live. Make sure that you tell a friend to tell a friend so we can be friends on a regular basis every day if possible. But today, the combine. There was a whole lot of, GMs talking, like staff talking, a lot of interviews. But John Lynch, I wanted to do this show around John Lynch's interview, and he had quite a few questions that he answered. He didn't really get too deep into anything specific, but I mean, he did say a few things that, gave some clarification to a few questions that the 49er fans had. And I'm going to start it off with the Brock Purdy question. So I'm going to pretty much go down the timeline of the questions that they asked. But Brock Purdy, somebody asked him about Brock Purdy, and is he still on track for the 20? What did they say? For next week or so. March, I think they said March 22nd to see if he was, but apparently he's going to meet somebody next week, and they'll get a better idea of if we're still on the same timeline. I mean, he didn't seem too worried about it, and I don't know if that's because they've got Trey in the chamber, and they're pleased with where Trey is at, or if that has anything to do with they're just not worried about it. He was asked the question about, what if this is they're saying that, if they open him up and it could end up being a full Tommy John. He didn't seem to be too worried about that. He says that there's always every doctor that he's dealt with has always had, they always give you the disclaimers of, this could happen. And we all know that. We've dealt with doctors, and we've all dealt with hospitals. They don't ever want to be definitive. They always want to give you the what ifs. But so I'm not, I think I'm with him. I think he's got a good problem to have. Like he has a starting quarterback. They have two really starting quarterbacks, and they have two guys that are going to be fighting for that spot. So it doesn't seem like John Lynch was that worried about the whole thing. So that's basically what I'm saying. But then he kind of moved on to Rand Carthen and him going to the Titans. Somebody asked him a question about, how much is Rand Carthen gonna be missed, and he had a lot of good things to say about Rand Carthon. And I think that is once again, it's, you notice all of these guys getting picked off of the 49ers staff, their coaching staff, their GM, their GM staff. I don't know what you want to call it, but their front office staff being kind of poached. Everybody wants a piece of that 49er culture. And I think that the 49ers have one of the best cultures in the league. I mean, obviously, they haven't won They haven't won their Super Bowl yet. I think it's coming, but when it comes, like when they get that Super Bowl, all of this culture is going to come to the forefront. People already want the pieces of the culture now, but imagine if the 49ers win one. Every team is going to want to run some version of what Kyle's running. Like, so it's going to be a very, for the foreseeable future, I just I hope Kyle is preparing and getting guys in the background ready for their next step, because it's going to be a complete like turnstile. Because everybody's going to want a piece. But what kind of guy are the Titans getting in Rand Carthon? And I think that Rand Carthon has been really involved with the scouting team. I think that he's one of those guys that I think that you can probably give a lot of some of the credit to for some of those later round picks that the 49ers hit on. I think that that's going to be a big reason why. And the Titans have always done a pretty good job of drafting and finding those pieces also. So I think that he can continue that. I know that they just got rid of their GM, so that sounds weird, but the reality is I think that they got rid of their GM more so because they couldn't keep people. Every single season, it seemed like they were losing all their guys, and I don't know how well they were managing the cap as far as that goes. So I think Rand Carthon can go in there and at least instill some of the things that the 49ers do for it. Because from a budgeting standpoint, I think the 49ers are great at budgeting their people and keeping the salary cap at bay and not being forced to just get. I mean, their team is stacked and they still got cap space. So granted, they're not paying a quarterback right now. I think when they pay a quarterback, that'll really show what they, because when they had Jimmy and they were paying Jimmy, granted they weren't paying Jimmy top dollar, but at the same time they were paying a quarterback and they were still able to bring guys in. They were making the team better, and the team got better every single season. Damian Lee came through. Appreciate you coming through, fam. He says, I love the 49ers drafting Stetson Bennett as QB3. I think at this point he's going to be QB4 because I think I'm pretty confident that they are going to bring in a veteran because of the whole Brock Purdy situation and not knowing he's showing Lynch is showing like a tough poker face right now, but they've got to be worried about like the timetable and because that to me I think you just go back to it comes back to you want a veteran in there that's not really that you're not planning on playing a whole bunch, but as much as it is you just want them to mentor those young guys, him to mentor those guys. And I think bringing in another young guy, while I mean it could be it could be a good thing, I just think that you bring in a veteran at this point and to beef up that QB room as far as from a reads and a knowledge standpoint, because they've got two guys already that either one of them really could start at this point, and it's totally going to be a competition. But yeah, I think that they could really use some wisdom and some experience in that QB room. So that's the way I kind of feel about it. But um, and Damien says, I would trade one of our weapons to either get help on either sides of the trenches. I mean, that necessarily, it depends on who we're talking about trading. And because this is the thing, it can't be for an offensive lineman because there's just not a lot out there. There's just, the offensive linemen, especially tackles at this point in the league, are a premium. There's not many good ones out there. And the teams that do have good ones aren't ready to let them go. So I would be surprised if they could do that, if they could get away with that, but I wouldn't be opposed to it. It depends on who we're talking about trading. But um, that being said, back to kind of Rand Carthen and the 49ers front office. I mean, how much is he going to be missed on this staff? That's kind of a I kind of question that. That's my biggest question is how is he going to be missed on, and was how deep was he in with the scouts? How did he manage that whole process? I'm just wondering how much of a part of it he really was, and will that will they struggle? The scouts struggle to get their voice and get some direction on where really the team on really who they should be looking at or whatever the case is. I'm not sure. And I think that that's something that it's going to be remains to be seen. I think that's something that won't really have its it won't really show itself until later. And I'm talking about a year or two down the road, because I think they've already really got their assignments right now and who they've already been looking at. They now it's just about I think, yeah, we might see that come next year and see really what who gets moved up into that position, what their style is, and I think it'll show in next year's draft, like on who steps up into that role. And because it sounded to me like Rand Carthon is just a good guy, and he was a guy that they liked having in the building, that the players vibed with. Trey spoke about him a couple times in his interview. That says a lot to me. That if the players are talking about a front office guy that's not their GM, not their not any one of their coaches that they deal with, talking about the guy, talking about playing with his kids, that kind of speaks to me as a as a guy that's a part of the culture. And I think that Tennessee got a good one. That's what I think is going to happen, because if you look at the guys that the teams that where are the 49er GM, the part of the front office guys have gone, Mayhew brought in a few good guys for Washington. I mean, I think they drafted well, and I'm I don't think I think if Rand Carthon is a part of those late round draft picks, I mean, if he's given carte blanche to in the, I would have liked to see some of his stuff in the first round. I think we all know that Kyle was the main guy making the decisions in those first couple of rounds, and it sometimes wasn't the greatest decision. But that's part of the power Kyle has, and I would have almost liked to see the scouting staff take control of the entire draft. That's my personal opinion on it, but I know that Kyle doesn't listen to any of us, so it is what it is. But uh, then he kind of moved on. Questions kind of moved on to D'Amico Ryans, and what did he mean to the team, and how much I think that I think everybody thinks that they're really going to miss D'Amico Ryans. I didn't think that Saleh. I thought that they were going to really miss Saleh, and I think we were all questioning when D'Amico took over. What is this going to be? Is the defense going to take a step back? Uh, all the thoughts. We're all having the same thoughts right now, because D'Amico actually, I feel like, improved upon what they were doing, and yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how you can go up from the number one defense and in the league. There's not really much. I think they ended up at number two at the after all was said and done, but I don't care. To me, they were number one defense in the league. They had a couple of bad games, and but they to me they were easily the most dominant defense in the league. So but I say all that to say D'Amico did a great job of making in-game adjustments, did a great job of putting people in positions to succeed and confusing quarterbacks. He did such a great job at that. He made guys that are really considered really good quarterbacks in this league, he confused them. Think about the things that he did to Aaron Rodgers, and even though those guys had open guys, they just didn't see it until it was too late. So it's going to be interesting to see how they replace D'Amico. I mean, I know they've got Steve Wilks. Obviously, we're all really anticipating Steve Wilks to do well, and to his credit, John Lynch talked about it today, and they're excited about Steve Wilks. So, but D'Amico, it's hard. It's hard to I think all of us, it's going to be hard to lose D'Amico's exuberance on the sideline and how the team, I feel the team felt about him. But but Steve Wilkes, I think, is commands a different kind of respect. I think it's going to be a different vibe. Um, I think it's going to be. I think it's still think it's going to be good. They may not be number one like they were last season. I think there's going to be a feeling out process. I think that there's going to be some adjustments. But at the end of the day, I think that the pieces, because the pieces aren't going to change that much. I think that that is going to be the key. I mean, because every team needs good players, and the 49ers are stacked on defense. Even though we're still looking for another pass rusher, even though we're looking for another interior lineman, that doesn't mean that we're in a bad situation at all. Like they're still going to be, I think, top five at the very least. So I don't think it's going to be that big of a deal. But as far as D'Amico goes, I think he will be missed by the fans because of, like I said, the exuberance, the all of it. Like honestly, it's he was just such a charismatic guy. He came up with that swarm defense, and it felt like the team enjoyed playing for him, and that speaks to culture. It speaks to culture. So, but and to Steve Wilkes, credit, like on in Carolina, his team loved playing for. They still were talking about him all off season, and they're saying the 49ers got a good one. So that's what we're trusting in. And I have faith. I have faith. I think that he's a respected guy. I think it's gonna be good. The question is how long? How long are we going to keep this man before he gets another head coaching spot? So I don't know. But East Coast Red and Gold podcast, appreciate you coming through, bro. Like you said, what's up? Yeah, like I said, appreciate you coming through. Make sure you check out East Coast Red and Gold podcast. They're doing some good things over there. But yeah, make sure you give those guys a subscribe. The um So we were talking about D'Amico, and we talked about Steve Wilkes, and he moved on to the most important person on that I feel on the staff, and how do you replace they lost this guy, but how do you replace the boombox guy? And I don't I don't I don't know how you replace because Lynch said that that they'll probably replace him. I don't know how you replace the boombox guy. I mean, I guess he should be at the combine right now, like doing squats or something to show him that he can carry that boombox up and down. But I mean, realistically speaking, it's that we're even mentioning that guy was a part of the staff. I thought that was pretty funny. But uh, so he went on to talk about Jimmy, and Damien said, "Did I see any kickers at the con?" I mean, I haven't seen anybody yet. I'm gonna probably start looking at videos tomorrow, but I'm looking at Moody from Michigan because I'm a Michigan fan. I'm gonna be paying close attention to him. And there was somebody else that another guy mentioned the other day that there's a couple of kickers in this draft, but I personally would like them to go ahead. The rumor is that they're gonna franchise Robbie Gold, and I don't necessarily disagree with it. They're in a Super Bowl window. The last thing you want to do is lose because the kicker. Like that's the last position on the field there. I mean, if they franchised him, we're talking about a little over 5 mil for the kicker. I don't think that's necessarily a bad price. Like for a guy that is going to be automatic in the playoffs. I I'm good. I'm good with Robbie. I'm not a. I don't have a problem with it. And but I could see if they want to go cheap and save some cash and go with one of these youngsters that with a big leg. That's what I would like to see them do, is go with a guy that has a big leg. If like if that's If they can get, I mean, it'll be later on in the draft. So I'd be shocked if they couldn't get one of those guys later on in the draft. But with that being said, we were talking about the so they started talking about, oh yeah, so East Coast Red and Gold said they'll do their due diligence on the kickers, but Robbie even said talks would start around combine. Yeah, I mean, yeah, the rumor is he's going to get franchised. I would think that they would just go ahead and sign and re-sign him, like 2-year deal. Um, I know that Robbie is thinking about moving back, like wants to go back to Chicago or what, the couple of things he was talking about. But I think if they make him a two year, just go ahead and make it 2-year 10 mil or 2-year 9 mil, whatever, and call it a day. Because, like I said, you do not want to chance this to the kicker. If it would be crushing for the 49ers to be on the precipice of making a Super Bowl and it's the kicker that does them in after they let Robbie Gold go. That would be tragic. And I don't want to see it. So, uh, but yeah, so Lynch after that started talking a little bit about Jimmy. I want to move on to Jimmy and how much they admire him, how much they appreciated what he gave them, because and he mentioned the discourse, which I'm surprised that they even acknowledged. I'm surprised that they even acknowledged it, but the reality is they know that it was obvious that there was some discourse between them and Jimmy towards the end there. And honestly, I think Jimmy just took the money because nobody else wanted him. But I don't think he wanted to be there. And then he was balling out like better than he had played ever, probably as a 49er. And then he gets hurt. So, and he still doesn't have his deal. So it'll be an interesting offseason for Jimmy. I feel bad, but Lynch made a point to say that it had run its course. It had run it. He thinks that it's run its course, which tells me that they don't have any plans of bringing Jimmy back, which was music to my ears. I'm sure it's music to a lot of your ears. And then there's some guys out there that are going to be heartbroken when he doesn't get re-signed. But we got to move on. We got to move on. It's time to bring somebody else in. He is not the only person that can get us to a Super Bowl. Let's just be real. This team is stacked. Like we just need one of our quarterbacks to stay healthy. It's that simple. Just one of them, please. But David says Jimmy reminds me of Trent Green. You know, Trent Green wasn't a bad quarterback. Like he had to be the unluckiest person on the planet for him to be ready to take over the greatest show on turf, and then for him to get hurt, and then they discover Kurt Warner. Yeah, but it's just we're over the whole Jimmy conversation, like, aren't we? I mean, the only reason why I'm mentioning him is because Lynch had to field a question about it. But I mean, the reality is they sound like they've moved on. Everybody's gonna have to move on eventually, and that's it. It's really that simple. Like we don't need to go into any more of it. But the next thing that he talked about was somebody asked him a question about the scouts and the scout team, and he went on and on about, I shouldn't say on and on. He spent a good like couple minutes talking about how important the scouts are for this team. And when you talk about all the hits that the 49ers have gotten in these mid to later rounds, that's the scout team. Those are the scouts. And I think it said a lot for Lynch to be acknowledge them as much as he did, because I think that they are really a good group for finding the people that they do in these later rounds. I mean, a majority of the 49ers good players are from the mid to later rounds. So it was good to hear him give credit where credit is due, and those are guys that I'm sure will be taking over some of these spots, like the Rand Carthon spot, and like a couple of the other spots. So it's yeah, it is what it is. But I like that they're recognizing the scouts, because they really are the lifeblood of this team. Like, that majority of the guys they've found is, I mean, everything is due to those late round picks. So, but the next person you talked about was CMC, and it was interesting because they asked him a question about how did they manage CMC with all of his injuries, and what his, like, with him being so injured, were they worried about that? And he talked about they didn't really manage him at all. Like, he was a full go, and it sounded like to me that they just don't have an interest. They don't have an interest in keeping guys healthy, and it's not about keeping guys healthy, but I think that they are true throwback guys, in the fact that you play guys. I don't want to hear anything about this rest and snap counts and all that other stuff. It's real old school. This is football. The player needs to figure out a way to stay healthy. That's the message that I got. Because not only did he say that about, and I'll get to Trey later, but that seems to be the vibe. And I think that 49er fans are going to have to get used to it. I think that a lot of people have been talking lately about it's their responsibility to keep the quarterbacks healthy. It's their responsibility to keep their players healthy. And I think that some of what uh what Lynch said is true. It rings true. Is that this is football? Like, the player has some responsibility to keep themselves healthy. Like, if you're not using proper techniques, and you're not doing the things that you're doing too much on a certain play, or whatever the case is, and you're putting yourself in harm's way, trying to make a play, when maybe it would just been fine with you just kind of corralling the guy, or whatever the case is, because there's tons of different scenarios. But I think some of it does fall on the player, like, because it's you can't put it on the coaching staff every single time. I think that a lot of this, and not to disrespect any content creators out there, like, but I think that this whole thing of protecting Trey, protecting Brock, and protecting the quarterbacks by beefing up protect the O line, and like all the other stuff. Not that I don't think that they could benefit from beefing up the O line, but I think it's a little overblown. I think it's a little overblown. There is no perfect way. We can talk about numbers, and we can talk about charts and graphs and who has the most injuries, all that stuff. Some of it's luck. I would say a majority of those injuries that the 49ers sustained was probably 2020. Like, yeah, they have injuries. Every team does. And some team, and you saw the I saw the graph of a bunch of people talking about like, comparing the numbers, and the last 5 were pretty similar in number. Yeah, the 49ers had the most, but 3 out of 4 of the last 4 years, the 49ers have been in the NFC Championship game, and once in the Super Bowl. I it's I think it's a little overblown. We're not winning it, so people are looking for something and someone to blame, and I get it, but at the same time, you can't let setbacks make you dive overboard. Like, that's in my opinion, it's not the way to go. Like, I will not feed into the madness. Like, because when you feed into it and then you start doing things that are outside of your character, what ends up happening is it's a recipe for disaster. Because then you've got to compensate. Now you're compensating and you're not calling things the way that you normally would, and it takes away some of the magic of that offense. It takes away some of the makes the players think a little bit more. And that's my deal on it. But I'm gonna move on. but it's it really was telling to me how he talked about CMC and how he wasn't managed at all. Like they basically, and we saw it. They gave that man touches for days. So Damien says, order 66 to Jimmy G fanboys. Yeah, dog. Like I don't get it. I don't get it why people are so adamant about Jimmy G. Like I don't get it at all. And then he says, I would trade Elijah Mitchell at the trade deadline. We need a Garrison Hurst type running back. Who's going to trade for Elijah Mitchell at this point? Nobody's going to give up anything of any worth for Elijah Mitchell. Like he's just hurt all the time, and I think the kid has got an immense amount of talent. He just can't. He can't stay on the field. And no, I don't think anybody's going to give up anything of any significance for that. So it is what it is. But and then CJ in the house, CG in the house. Appreciate you coming through, brother. Yo yo yo. And but yeah, so let's move on. I don't know how that happened. Let's move on to they talked about Bobby Slowick going to the Texans. For some reason, to me, this seems like a nothing burger of a hire. I know that Lynch was really kind. He pretended like not pretend. I shouldn't say pretended. He spoke like about Bobby Slowick like he speaks about everybody. Like that he's a really valued member of the staff, and I'm sure he is. I'm sure he is. That's why. But also, they're not going to let anybody go of any significance. Right now, they don't even have an offensive coordinator. So if they wanted to keep Bobby Slowick, they could have just promoted him, but they didn't. So that kind of tells me that all that I need to know. And not to say that he's bad by any stretch of the imagination, but I think that they weren't that they almost threw D'Amico a bone in that situation. So and realistically speaking, yeah, I just don't see it being that big of an issue. But CG says, I hope we replace Jake Brendel. I mean, I'm with you on that. I think that they need to solidify the position. That's the important thing to me, is that they solidify the center spot. I don't want a stopgap. I think that since Shanny has been here, they haven't they've had a bona fide starter there for one season with Alex Mack. Everybody else has been a stopgap. And yeah, it's just they've got to find a person to solidify that spot for the foreseeable future. And if that's Brendel, okay. I mean, I don't think he did a bad job. I think Brendel did a really good job for what, statistically speaking, he didn't do bad at all. And I don't think necessarily he was a hindrance at all. So I wouldn't necessarily. It just depends on what the money says. I'm not paying him any because he was just serviceable. He wasn't a monster or anything. So I would like to see them draft somebody and, like I said, solidify that position. If you could get one of these the free agent guys, I wouldn't mind you spending money there just to solidify that spot. So there's a couple of guys out there, Bradbury, and there was another guy, the guy on the Vikings, and I'm gonna have to look at it later. But yeah, I wouldn't mind them replacing Brendel. And Roberto in the house, appreciate you coming through, brother. Niner gang all day, every day. You know what it is. And but yeah, back to Trey now, because this is where the interview I thought got really good. So he said Trey looks good. He used the analogy or the example again of being able to see the field from his office, and talking about, just like he talked about Kinlaw last year, now he's talking about Trey, and he says that Trey, he might not be 100%, but I mean, to him, he looks pretty good. And I think that that's really a good thing to hear. I think that he's going to be ready to go come OTA time. I think we all saw his tweet about wanting receivers to come out and catch balls from him. But he also said that Trey, and this is where we go back to the CMC point, Trey has to find a way to stay healthy. He just has to. It has to happen. And while I don't think it's all Trey's fault, because I completely blame Shanny in that situation. And when I say I completely blame him, it's really about I just don't think Trey is a running style quarterback. I just don't think that he's that guy. He's not a good runner. Now, if you say that he has to find a way to be a better runner and be just better and get used to using as athleticism and being a better runner and being better at like kind of minimizing the contact, then yeah, I could see it. If you're just adamant about making him that guy, I am a true believer that they need to make him a pocket passer, and he just needs to get whatever rushing yards he's going to get is him running out of the pocket. Like I don't want to see any more of the QB option stuff. That's me personally. But I wouldn't be surprised if they go to the well again, because I think that the way they talk, it seems like they think it's a Trey issue and not their issue. They want to run the offense that they want to run with Trey. And it doesn't sound to me like they have any remorse about the way they're almost thinking that it's his issue. That's the way it sounds to me. And but and he even went on to speak about how he really feels he's very confident that Trey can be a dual threat. I just don't see it. I don't see it. He's not that style. I don't know why you would when a player is telling you, not telling you, but he's telling you with his play. When they're the play, it's on film. When they're telling you that this is not us. I think it could be go as far as to say, hey, we misevaluated, and we're just not going to admit that we misevaluated. That's the way that could be what it is too. So, and they're just going to put it on the player. But I think the fans and everybody else knows that's watched can tell you what it is for Trey. And I hope that they change that game plan, but we'll see. Before we get out of here, I'm just going to go over the last couple of things that he talked about. He talked about appreciation for Mike McDaniel. We all have appreciation for Mike McDaniel. That was a guy that it was great. I miss his press conferences. That is something I'll watch his press conferences for the Dolphins just to hear him talk. He cracks me up. And I've been pulling for Mike McDaniel the whole time, even with all the Dolphin fans going crazy and talking madness. But I like Mike McDaniel. So and I know that he touches a soft space. They have a soft spot in their heart for him also. So but he made a comment. The last thing I want to talk about, he made a comment. Roberto, before I get to that, Roberto says every time I see Trey play, he looked nervous, running immediately instead of looking for an open receiver. You know, I don't think he necessarily got nervous every time. He looked he looked good in that second half of that Texans game. And I think that it all comes down to reps. Like we're talking about he looked nervous. Well, guess what happens when you get reps and get used to being out there? You're not as nervous. This guy has played a total of 4 professional games, and he didn't play much college. In order for him to shake all that stuff off, he has to get reps. He has to. He has to get on the field. He has to do it. And that doesn't mean you put him in running situations. It means that you let him throw the ball. In preseason, he's throwing. If I'm them, I am not even running the ball. I'm passing the ball every single down. And it doesn't matter how it looks. It doesn't matter how it looks. Like it all that matters is that he's getting the reps, he's getting a chance to see what the defense is doing. And then when the season starts, then you can do all the things and all the bells and whistles. But honestly, he needs as many passing reps as he can possibly get. That's how I feel about it. So yeah, and he says that Roberto says hopes Trey comes back to start next season. We all do, bro. We all do. And oh, what's going on, John V? Appreciate you coming through, fam. Like always a pleasure. And hey, make sure you check out Locker Room Rant podcast. They got a great show. I love watching those guys vibe out every single week. Like, make sure you give my man John V a subscription and a follow on Twitter. So, and I don't know, John. I don't know, John. Are you part of the? I'm wondering, are you part of the 49er Podcast Network? Because that's a whole other thing I haven't even mentioned. 49er Podcast Network. It's a nuke. I'm gonna call it a conglomerate, like because we've got like 10 or 12 people, content creators, that are gonna be mixing it up. We got a show every Thursday. Make sure you guys go out and check that out. Make sure you give 49er Podcast Network a subscribe. My man Niner Sickness and Beto and Brandon at Forever Faithful. It's a kind of a thing that they're coming together to form. They got a bunch of us, TED Talks balls with us. We got Gina repping the Bay. We got I think John is, oh yes, he is on. He says I am. So yeah, now John's a part of the family. Like we taking over. So y'all just better get ready. No, we're gonna inundate you. We flooding the block. Like it's gonna be Niner content all day. So all day. But yeah, he says thank you for. Hey man, pleasure's mine. Like I loved having you on the show. We're gonna have to have you on again soon. If you guys want, if you want me to come on, you let me know anytime. So, but appreciate you coming through, bro. But lastly, but not least, like before I get out of here, I want to mention the last thing that Lynch brought up, which was about Lenore and how big he was for this team down the stretch. And I know that a lot of people will look at to Ambry Thomas and say, the Ambry was like that too last year, and it could be the same thing. Nah, I think it's a little different. Lenore got it was a much bigger it was a much bigger sample size. Like, and I think Lenore gives them, and he spoke on it, gives them a lot of flexibility. It gives them a lot of flexibility with what they can do. I still think that they want to bring back Emmanuel Mosley. I think that because I think they're going to have an opportunity to bring him back on the cheap. And of course, we want our players to get what they can get, but at the same time, I think that with that injury and his injury history in general, I think that he's going to have to come back on a 1-year prove deal, just so that somebody else can pay him, because somebody else is going to have to pay him. But I think I think that they're going to prioritize having him come back. But you've got Lenore there to back him up. You still got Womack sitting in the wings, and I fully expect them to draft another corner in this draft. They've got like, what, 12 picks? Like, so be ready. It's coming. And but with that being said, we're going to get out of here. It's supposed to be 30 minutes. You guys got to help me. Like, I got to get, I got to get to a point to where I get these shows down to 30, 35 minutes, because, promise the wife. I know you guys don't need to know all that, but at the same time, like, we're trying to get the like shorter shows but more shows, so that we can so that I can give you guys as much content and just keep it fresh, and so that we're not trying to talk about everything in one show and you guys don't have to sit there and listen to me for like an hour and a half. Like but with that being said, we're going to get out of here today, and I will be back tomorrow. Guess who I've got an old friend of the show coming back for this one. And the people that have watched my show for a long time, I used to have this man on all the time, and it's good. It's going to be good to have him back. But Chris Polo will be here tomorrow. I'll be on at 6:30 Pacific time, and sure you guys come and check that out. But before I get out of here, make sure you like, make sure you subscribe, make sure you ring that bell for the notifications, and so you know when we go live. And make sure that you know that you can get the audio podcast anywhere you can get your audio podcast. But make sure you give me that 5-star rating because it helps the algorithm. And I don't care where you get it. Just get it and tell a friend. Share it all. Please share the podcast with anybody that'll listen. But with that being said, I'm going to get out of here. Thank you guys so much, everybody in the chat. John, appreciate you coming through. All the guys that normally come through, Damien and East Coast Red and Gold, and my thing isn't going up. Roberto, CG, all you guys. I appreciate you coming through, asking questions, giving me your takes, because that's what we wanted to be. We wanted to be a community, and that's what I really want. I want us all to get used to seeing each other on a daily basis. But I'm gonna get out of here. I promise y'all, I'm gonna stop talking. But with that being said, we always let it go with Go Niners.